Welcome to the Abundant Vision Fundraising Podcast. Whether you are a seasoned professional or a first-time fundraiser, we have the advice you need to take your next step toward major gift mastery. I'm your host, Tom Dauber, President of Abundant Vision Philanthropic Consulting. I am here today with my friend and colleague, Dr. Tim Meyer. Tim is the Vice President for, is it advancement or
development?
Development for the Christian Missionary Alliance. Doing a great job over there. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Tom. Really honored that you would have me.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I feel the same way. Well, Tim, tell us a little bit about yourself. You come from a non-traditional background, which a lot of us do, and I absolutely love that. But before we get into all the fundraising stuff, I'd love to hear about how you spend your time when you're not focused on fundraising.
Yeah, I have two boys, so a lot of our energy right now are high school and middle school boys and their sports and their lives and their needs. But personally, I love to run. I'm a musician as well, so I like to play music and like to listen to music. So we stay fairly busy, though, in this phase of life, running to volleyball games and band concerts and all the rest. So that's kind of the world we're currently in.
That's awesome. Now, are you a 5K, 10K guy, or are you more like a marathon, half marathon guy?
These days, I'm more of a 5K, 10K guy, but 10 years ago, I ran my last marathon, which was the Boston Marathon that got bombed, actually.
So wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was there.
Wow.
And fortunately had finished earlier, but was relatively close to the area that got bombed. So I've done 5 marathons. I was a long distance runner in college, that kind of thing. But these days it's mostly just so that I can continue to eat pizza into my 40s. Yeah. That's it.
Oh, that's great. That is excellent. So you do running, you do music, and you've got kids. So that's certainly a full plate right there. So how did you go? Because I know you have a doctorate in theology. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's actually it's theological leadership, but it's in leadership in the global context was the focus of the program. I did my dissertation on cross-cultural mentoring. So what happens when folks go on cross-cultural experiences around the world and get mentored? And what are the principles that actually help to make those cross-cultural experiences lasting and transformative in their lives? And so, I finished that 7 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did you ever imagine yourself at the time becoming a professional fundraiser?
Absolutely not.
Well, tell us that story. How did you get there?
Yeah. So if I go back to college, I was actually an English lit major in college, was not thinking about any sort of theological or church work or mission work. But throughout that time, I went on a couple of trips to places like Guatemala and Peru and some other places and really felt drawn to meet needs. And so I married my wife right out of college. We were very young and we decided to go to seminary mostly to buy myself some time to figure out what I wanted to do sort of with my life. Did a master's program there, a 3-year master's program in divinity, and got a job at a church. I worked primarily with youth and doing worship services and those kind of things. We were in it's interesting when I think about all of our journeys because I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, lower middle class, and my wife, the same thing, moved to a fairly wealthy area. I did my master's in New York and we were at a church in New Jersey. And it was the first time I was exposed to people with wealth, really, for an extended period of time, and people with wealth who were generous. And that has helped shape me. Those were the first gifts I ever got because from there, we decided to move overseas for a 5-year period. And we moved to France to work with young adults and do some other things. And it was then that I got the first gifts. And one of the very first gifts that I got, a guy said to me, because I was going over the top thinking it was like an $8,000 gift to help us outfit our ministry overseas and buy some of the essentials. And I was blown away by this $8,000 gift. And I was just going over the top, thanking him. I was probably 27, 28. And he goes, look, quit thanking me so much and just say thank you once. You know this is coming again. Now you need to figure out how to ask me for something else. And that was the first coaching I ever got. I'm like 27, 28. That was cool.
That's great.
That was cool. And then, yeah, we lived overseas. We moved our 18-month-old, who was our youngest at the time. He's now almost 18.
Mm-hmm.
And we had our second overseas. And then we moved back to the States. I led one of our startup mission branches that was global, that was kind of doing short-term trips for people and internships. And that's why I did the dissertation on the internship side of things
Mm-hmm.
for 5 years. And then our president of our overall denomination. So the organization I work for is 2,000 churches in the US, but 27,000 worldwide. And so we have all of these workers from the US and other countries that partner together around the world. And so our president recruited me for this development job. I was 38 at the time. I did not have formal experience, and that's how I got here. But it's been a fun ride. I'm coming up on 6 years now.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. Well, we're talking about those early days in the fundraising world. I'm curious, is there one piece of advice you wish someone would have given you as an early career fundraiser?
This was a great question. I think about the early advice. I was fortunate to have really good people around me giving me good advice. But when I think about what I wish somebody would have told me, even like week one or day one,
Yeah.
would have been, in some places, this is going to take way longer than you think. And in some places, it's going to happen way faster than you think. And don't overthink either side.
Yeah.
So don't get impatient with the long process and the long relationship. And don't think you're amazing because you got a quick gift in this other place,
Yeah.
because it's not always formulaic.
Yeah.
It's money and donations follow vision. Vision follows relationships. Relationships happen at the speed of trust, right?
Yeah.
So the speed of trust happens very quickly if somebody's already bought in or they knew me before. Sometimes that takes a long time. And so those, I think I was getting too happy with early success on the one hand and too impatient or discouraged with a lack of perceived success just because it took longer. And so I think just understanding everybody's different, every moment is different, every donor is different, and to be thoughtful and to be customized in some ways to every group, every person is what I wish somebody would have said to me. Part of that is because when you get a win early on, you think, well, I just got to reproduce that thing over and over and over. Whatever I
Yeah.
said
Yeah.
in that moment or whatever is said in the email, I better do that every time. And it's like, actually, it just worked because of that donor. And then
Yeah.
the inverse is also true.
That's right. Yeah. I think back to my first years in major gift fundraising, and there very much was this desire to be impatient and to just move
Yeah,
forward. And I got to get
right.
that gift so I can demonstrate. And boy, I sometimes wonder, and I'm curious if you've ever thought about this. How did both of us did collegiate track and field. How has your experience, and this wasn't our list of questions, how's your experience as a track and field, kind of a higher level athlete, impacted the way you approach your fundraising career?
Oh, it's a good question and it's easy to answer. I think
Yeah.
it's very, very much in terms of resiliency. So I'm still a runner, even though I'm slower than I used to be, and I don't run as long
Aren't
as I
we
used
all?
to be. Yeah, but I still get up early and I hit the roads. Now finally the sun is coming up. By 6, we get first light at 6 o'clock and then earlier and earlier. But man, through those winter months, it's dark and it's
Hmm.
cold and you're
Yeah.
just out there grinding. And one day you have a race, or one day all of a sudden you have breakthrough. Whenever I'm coaching an early distance runner, it's very similar to fundraising. It's doing the next right thing the next day
Yeah.
and doing the mobility training and the strength training, and all of those miles eventually pay off, but you can't do it without all the miles. So in the
Yeah.
distance running, there's no way just to show up and be off at a long race. Even if you are the world's most gifted athlete, you're not going to keep up with the guys unless you put in the miles. And the same thing is true in fundraising. So that resilience, to do the next right thing, and then not to get discouraged because some days you just don't have it. Some days you have bad races or you have a bad moment and you can't overthink. Again, on both sides. If I have one good long run, I can't think, wow, I'm amazing now. No, it's the next day that matters, you know?
That's
and
right.
and and the inverse is true. So yeah, I think about those things a lot with my kids in sports now too. Like the lessons they're learning are really
Hmm.
valuable.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. So tell me about your current role with CMA. What does your position entail? What all does it mean to be vice president there?
Yeah, so my role is to be the chief fundraiser. So, in some ways, I am the CDO of the
Hmm.
organization, chief development officer. But in a denomination, I actually have 40 people on my team. I oversee all of our marketing teams, our communication teams,
Hmm.
our events teams, archives, uh, all of our some of our data folks, as well as the direct fundraising team. So our sub team of relationship management, our funding team is 8 people. Those are
Hmm.
the major gift officers. So it's a little bit of a cloudy role. Also, we don't have an executive VP or a COO. So some of the things I do are in that realm, galvanizing some people together or showing up, representing the denomination in various functions, speaking in places. So it's a bit of a weird, like I don't have, when I talk to other people in denominations, there's some similarities. But in terms of chief development officer at a nonprofit, it's a little different than some of my peers. So that's a lot of it's team leadership, vision casting, vision establishment, language of the organization, all those things.
Got it. Now, you've been in your role for almost just over like 5.5 years. As you think back on the various problems you've run into, challenges you faced, is there one problem that you ran up against that you wish you could have a do over on?
Yeah, there are probably 5 or 10, but I'll just give you one.
Just give me the best.
One would have been we changed the way that we are releasing funds or funded in the sense that we were a hybrid of general giving and designated giving to projects and workers with a high emphasis on general giving, and we still are. We're the highest percentage of general giving in our kind of organization.
Tell me what that means. What's general giving?
Yeah, general giving is just give to the org. So they would just write a check to the alliance.
Got it.
And when I came in, we were receiving about 42 million a year in those kind of gifts, and then about 16 million a year of designated money that we were not budgeting for. It was just if it
Hmm.
comes in, it comes in for
Yeah.
projects around the world, crisis response, all those kind of things. We decided to merge those things together and then to create a bit of a hybrid situation where a lot of our workers would self-subscribe. Some they would have fundraising goals themselves, not 100%, but some fundraising goals, and then we would budget for the whole thing. We were right that it was the right thing to do because we've grown it now to this year we'll hit 72 million, so we've
Yeah.
grown it significantly, more than 10 million more. However, when we changed it, like a lot of organizations and a lot of places have these things that feel sacred even if they're
Mm.
not.
Yeah.
And there was kind of a myth in the organization that like anybody who received funds didn't ever have to be responsible for these funds because we weren't having to raise 100% of salaries and all those kind of things. But really, they were responsible in a lot of ways for their fundraising. They were still interconnected with donors and churches and all these things. And it felt to donors and churches like we were saying, we don't have enough money. Now all of our workers have to help us raise the extra money.
Okay.
And it felt like we were adding to their burden. And a lot of these
Hmm.
people are working in very challenging situations overseas, Africa, Central Asia, challenging places. And our communication plan and strategy for that affected our fundraising
Got it.
because we were not able to bring the donors along. It took a long time to bring key stakeholders along. And so one of the things I wish we would have had a do-over on is that we would have segmented our lists and we would have been able to meet with key stakeholders earlier and describe exactly why we were doing it and what we were doing. And we could have even identified those people. Part of that's because our CRM was broken at the time and we weren't using it correctly either. So we had a lot of system issues, but I think the bottom line is we didn't navigate organizational change as well as we could have, and it really affected our fundraising, and we underestimated how much it would.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. Tom Dauber here for Abundant Vision Philanthropic Consulting. Fundraising can be hard work, and it can be hard to mentally get into the place you need to be in order to see new opportunities. Everyone struggles with it. We are like the fish in the fishbowl who just can't see the water they're swimming in. That's when having outside expertise comes in handy. For 25 years, I've been helping nonprofits analyze their challenges, discover new ways forward, and develop clear plans that lead to greater fundraising revenues. Now I am available to help your organization develop the abundant vision it needs to inspire new levels of philanthropy at your nonprofit as well. Check out abundantvision.net to start your journey toward greater fundraising success today. Now, back to the show. When you're changing the way you're communicating about fundraising, when you're changing, especially in a missionary support type of atmosphere, that can get really tricky. I've seen some places go kind of the opposite, where the development staff takes on the entire burden of fundraising. The mission staff doesn't have to do any fundraising at all. And what I've seen in that environment is that all of a sudden the mission staff isn't really doing the community relations, stewardship type work that they otherwise would be doing, the church relations stuff, all
Absolutely.
that sort of thing. And that's disappointing to see when that happens.
It's disappointing. It's also a missed opportunity because people love giving to people,
That's right.
especially these days more than just organizations. So again, I think we were right about the change and we did it and it's paying off, in crass terms. But the truth is, people, it just leading through change is hard. And so there was just a lot of things that I think we could have done a little bit better on the front end. And we're still playing catch up there. But again, it's working. So it was worth it. It was a challenge.
Yeah. Well, good for you for making it through. Now, I'd love to hear your best discovery, qualification, or disqualification story that you've run into over the years.
Yeah. I was thinking about, there are a couple of fun examples here. I'm actually going to use a donor that I've been working with quite recently on a very significant mega gift. And when we discovered them. So I was actually working in my previous role, which was with this organization called Envision. And part of our mission was really to make meaning for millennials. This is 10 years ago in their lives, in terms of how they live their lives out in service. Of course, we're coming from a faith-based place. So, living their lives filled up with meaning with God, those kind of things. And we were talking a lot about generational shift at the time. And I was just doing a seminar with a coworker at a conference. And we had a lady come up to us who did not fit the demographic. And frankly, on the surface, she did not look like she would care about what we were talking about at all. And
Wow.
she said, I really love the ethos of what you're talking about. I have kids in this demographic. I would love to hear more about how you're trying to mobilize a generation to think differently about how to spend their lives overseas. And part of the thing that we were saying was millennials are not self-centered. They just need directed. It felt like they were more self-centered, but they just want somebody to give them a greater purpose than themselves and help them and mentor them. And so she said, I'd like to hear more. We were naive in the fundraising space. So we were not even thinking about the implications of like, this person could be a donor.
Oh, wow.
This person could be, we really weren't thinking about this. She was just an encouraging woman, but we invited her and her husband to come to one of our trainings. And it was then that she said, hey, I would like to give you guys some startup funds to do some things and to dream about those things. Again, we were so naive. We didn't know about well screening. I had no clue what kind of capacity we were talking about. And for us at the time, our whole annual budget was like $200,000. So their gift of $50,000 was like huge for us.
Wow.
And so that felt like revolutionary. That year over year, we started going on trips with them. I'm going to talk a different thing about cultivation. But these days, and I was just on the phone with them literally this morning, this is 10 years later, we're talking about multi-million-dollar, lean in. And the reason I bring this up is because it was a great lesson for me to realize that people give money to the things that they value and the things that they're passionate about.
Right.
Even if it doesn't make a lot of sense to you, and even if it isn't obvious on the surface, this was a passion area for them. So connecting their hearts to something that mattered to them. It happened to be right place, right time for us, but we had to do some then vetting and qualification of after the first gift, then we got help and started asking people like, what does this mean? What do you think this is? Then all the experts, and now I feel like, well, I have some expertise, know what to tell myself back then.
Right.
To know even what's appropriate in terms of ask and all those kind of things. But the discovery was an important one for me to realize that connecting passion to generosity.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. That's all the time we have today. But be sure to tune in next week to hear the next part of this exciting conversation. Now, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast provider. I'm your host, Tom Dauber. Thank you for joining me as we journey together towards major gift mastery on the Abundant Vision Fundraising Podcast.